This is October 30th, and Floyd, Emma, and I are meeting to start our first specific activity in accord with our outline of yesterday. We will first meditate, and our object in this meditation will be to be receptive to whatever unfoldment or direction may come to us, and then we will act on the result of the meditation. We meditated only a minute when it came to me to say this, that the object of our meditation being to seek guidance in the next step, that should anything be given to me or to Floyd or Emma, that our meditation should be interrupted so that whatever was given could be shared with the three of us. And it must be remembered that we are sitting here very much as if we were amateurs, rank beginners in this work, since we have no knowledge of the full reason for our being here, or how the goal that originally brought us together in this work is to be fulfilled. And so it will be with you, that even though in the back of your mind is the goal that we are in some way or other to be a witness to the dissolving of material sense, you will have no more each day than we have now as to what the mode or means of that activity will be. And so you will be as completely in the dark as you go into meditation as we are. We have been meditating 28 minutes, and this is the first thing that is given me, and it is for us here and for you. You have all sat with me in meditation, and you have all felt the fruitage of that experience. In some cases, meditating with me, that is, when we were both physically present together and in meditation, you have felt everything from a slight uplift to an experience of such magnitude that it resulted in lifting you into the higher consciousness, that which is called the fourth dimension. Sometimes in and through this experience have had healings of physical conditions and other healings. Therefore, you know the meaning of where two or more are gathered in my name. And you do know that an individual meditating with one of higher consciousness receives illumination and unfoldment through this experience. Likewise, you yourselves have had others sit with you in meditation, and you have had an opportunity to witness the fruitage of such an experience. Also in the fact that your student received some measure of uplift, illumination, or healing, and sometimes all of these. And so, I will ask you, before you begin your daily meditation for this specific work, that you consciously remember our living room here at Helico, and feel that you are actually sitting in this room and meditating with us here, since you know that there are 3 of us already here, and as a result of our meditations, consciousness is very high. And so, before you start your meditation, place yourself in this room and realize that you are attuned or at one with the consciousness of us here in this room. And then from that point, start your meditation, always remembering you are in this room, and whether or not anyone is in this room, the consciousness of our daily meditation is here, to which you attune yourself. This next meditation was 12 minutes, and what was given me is this: how forms of matter are changed by us by something other than the application of material energy. Let me explain that. A person has a fever, and materially that would be treated by an external application of cold or an internal application of some form of chemical called medicine. And the application of the power of cold or the power of the medicine would change the form of matter, fever, energy, heat, and transform it down to its normal state. Now, we accomplish the same purpose. An individual has a fever, and without the application of cold or medicine, and even separated by thousands of miles, we instantly reduce the fever to a normal temperature. What activity in us, invisible activity, and to the 5 physical senses, intangible activity, has acted in the physical realm to change the form of matter or energy? And the answer is consciousness. Our consciousness of consciousness as the only power the only cause, the only substance, and the only action, our consciousness of this truth, operates to change these forms of matter, whether in the form of fever or lumps or dislocations, growths, nerves, regardless of what physical form of discord we are faced with. Consciousness changes those forms, transmutes them into what is called the normal human or physical form. Now the question is, to what extent does our consciousness of this truth operate in so-called human experience to transmute the dross into gold, that is, the inharmony and discord into harmony? To what extent is that possible? We know through our practice that there is practically no limit to the extent of that activity, which is called the activity of healing, insofar as it affects the healing of an individual. We have well established that whether it is a simple cold or a cancer or consumption, and in many instances broken bones, dislocations, deafness, blindness, sometimes even to a degree of totality, that an activity of consciousness acting upon so-called material form changes the form of the matter or the form of the energy from the discordant and inharmonious to the so-called normal and natural. Actually, what we have discovered is, in metaphysical practice, that every discord and inharmony of a physical nature has its actual seat in a mental activity of some kind, whether universal or individual. And therefore, the consciousness of truth does not really act upon matter, the body or form, but it acts upon the mind of the individual, which in turn acts upon the body or form. Now, in our healing work, we realize that most of the discords and inharmonies of the world are universal beliefs, and only a few are really personal in nature. And even then it's because of the intensity of the universal belief. And so our work is not even in the realm of touching the mind of an individual, except insofar as our consciousness of truth may touch the mind of the individual who has turned to us for help. So the question that arises now is whether or not our consciousness of truth, in touching the universal mind of man, will not heal or remove the destructive element of mind universally as well as individually. As you know, the group that we call the 25, which actually means the group all around the clock, that are devoting periods of meditation each day to the realization of truth destroying material sense or dissolving material sense must have been very effective in this matter of the Asian flu, which has been epidemic around the world for several months. Floyd asked the question last week whether I had had many cases of this Asian flu in my practice or correspondence, and my answer was that I hadn't had a single call for help on this subject, nor had any of the practitioners written me that they were burdened with these cases. And then Floyd told me that in all of his activity here in the islands and correspondence from the mainland, that he also had not been called upon for a single case. And of course this made me search my thought, and I find that in all of my correspondence there has not even been the complaint from any of our students that their families were suffering from this. So that even while not claiming that our household may have been completely free of it, since I do not necessarily hear from everybody, it is evident that we must have been touched very lightly, if at all, yet in the midst of this heavy epidemic experience. And so we must conclude that the work of the 25, that is, the work that is being done around the clock, has protected the households of our students from this epidemic. Then, evidently, this subject has since been active in our work here, and we find that whereas 2 days ago, according to the newspapers, there was no break in this epidemic, and no publication of a break, but rather that it was assuming greater proportions, today we find that it is not only broken, but broken way, way down. And so there we are led to believe that this specific work of the past 2 days may have carried our activity in dissolving material sense into a deeper level of fruitage. This we will continue to observe in this and other ways. This is October 31st, and we have met at the usual time, 1:30. We have meditated 25 minutes, and nothing specific has come beyond the fact that all three of us had very, very deep stirrings within that could be physically felt. We will now meditate again. Our second meditation was 15 minutes, and in this both Emma and Floyd had an unfoldment of exactly the same nature, in fact identical, but it is of such a nature that it would be too personal to put it on this tape. And so the reason that I am making this comment is to bring to your attention that you will experience, as we already have, some experiences peculiar to you alone. And it is for this that, or with this, that you will work for whatever purpose it may be given you. In our third meditation today, it came to me that from Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, and I am ordained to heal the sick. And with that came the realization that it is not necessarily any knowledge of truth that we are seeking in these periods, but actually only that the Spirit of the Lord God be upon us. For when it's there, regardless of the fact that there may be no thoughts, no words, no knowledge, the healing influence is in operation. This is November 1st, and we have now a little specific work to do for realization and unfoldment. Ordinarily, our work will be of a universal nature to dissolve that which is called the activity of the mind, material sense. But there are certain aspects of material sense which have not yielded as readily as some other claims. And I think that we should take up some specific work to see what kind of an unfoldment we might get. In all of my years of practice, I have had 2 practically instantaneous healings of cataracts, and 1 or 2 slow healings. But I have had dozens of claims which were not met at all. It does not necessarily follow that these were failures, because in some cases the opportunity was not given me to work on it for long periods of time, which sometimes is necessary, more especially where there may be something in the consciousness of the individual contributing to the experience. But I know that there have been cases in which I was given adequate time, opportunity, and yet did not witness the healing. And at this present time, we have several claims of this nature, and I think that if we do some specific work without any regard to who has these claims or anything of that nature, but merely knowing that in our meditation we seek light on the subject, perhaps we will be given something that may meet this particular situation better than we have in the past. It has been my experience with other practitioners also that this particular claim has been a difficult one to meet. So I would suggest that today we see where we're led in this, and as any unfoldment comes to us, we will report it on tape. Also, you who are hearing the tape, you might, at this particular time, see what unfoldment comes to you along this line. The answer that came immediately to me is that this too is a mind creation, and mind and its creations are all the second chapter of Genesis, or nothing, and therefore we cannot work in that realm at all. In other words, we do not work or pray about the second chapter of Genesis creation beyond knowing that it is a mind creation and nothingness, or the arm of flesh. Emma says that instantly it also came to her that they have only the arm of flesh, and Floyd says that it instantly came to him that it's either something or nothing, and if it's the activity of mind, a mind creation, then it's nothing. So let us go forward from here. Now, you know that there is still this matter of the advertising gadget. The principle behind it is that these ads flashed on the screen in front of your eyes so fast that you can't see them, nevertheless register in the subconscious and make you perform that which you are instructed to do. It has recently been brought out in the newspapers that the two most likely fields for this activity will be politics and religion. But regardless of what purpose it may be used for, it is a direct activity of hypnotism, or call it suggestion in such a strong form as to amount to hypnotism, in which the public is caused to act without its own volition, in a way that it itself does not decide to do. As a matter of fact, to obey impulses that are not its own, that are superimposed upon it from without. This is certainly mass control, or control of the mass mind. Now, this is the same principle which produces all the sin and disease there is in the world, except that this would be projected by individuals, whereas the other is projected by the accumulated activity of individual theory, impressing itself upon the universal mind, and then thence into the individual thought. So that it becomes necessary for us to work daily specifically until we receive some inner realization that will assure us that such mass hypnotism cannot be made to succeed. Now, on the first two experiments, it succeeded. On the third, it failed. We have no way of knowing why the third one failed, beyond the fact that I was working specifically on that, but there were certain other aspects of the trial present that defeated it, or helped to defeat it, and so we have really no way of knowing whether we have mastery over that situation or not. Therefore, it's necessary for us to continue until there is some further experiments performed and results made public. Since there is a Wall Street firm interested in promoting this idea, which means that the idea has behind it millions of dollars and influential people. And if it can be made to succeed, that there is no end to the iniquities that it can perform, because there is at the same time no conscience revealed in the nature of this promotion. No indication that there is any idea or object beyond that of creating another advertising medium. This is a challenge. If this could succeed, there would be no hope on earth for mankind ever to be free of domination by small groups. Because with a concealed weapon of that kind, no man would know when he's being influenced, nor would he have the opportunity to reason or think. Since this is an instrument for getting behind man's reasoning or thinking mind into his subconscious without his consent. Let's work on that. Was that recorded, what I was saying? All right, now we have meditated, and the first thing that comes to me is that this activity is the activity, well, it's a hypnotic activity of the particular facet of domination, one mind controlling another mind. Greed, an activity of a mind activity of greed, hypnotic activity of greed, hypnotic activity of domination. Let us see the nothingness of these. Since mind is an avenue of awareness and not a power, it becomes necessary to rise above the knowledge of this into the realization of it. All right? It came then that I alone am the Lord, and I only, and that I will produce after my own kind, and no other. This is November 2nd. This afternoon from 1:30 to 3, Daisy Shigemura came in and for the first time heard this entire tape from the beginning up to this point where we left off November 1st, and began to take active part. The days that she cannot be here, she will function just as the rest of you from wherever she is, but there will be days in the week in which she will come in and join Floyd, Emma, and myself. Meanwhile, Floyd was working on Maui today, and so we are here tonight at 9:50, and we'll carry on as if it were the afternoon period. Our first meditation was 25 minutes, and in that there was only the ability to achieve an inner peace. The second meditation has been 15 minutes, and in this one I received a complete release, so that as I took up each of the matters on which we are working, I very quickly was given release, which was the realization, of course, that the Spirit was touching each one of these. Anything with you? On Sunday, the 3rd, we made no recording, but Emma and I were here alone, and actually the message that came through was one of our most powerful. But the meditation continued through the afternoon and the evening, late into the night, and so no recording was done. Now, however, Floyd, Emma, and I are here again at 1:30 p.m. on the 4th, and I will tell you that which revealed itself yesterday was a deeper unfoldment of the nature of God. This is very difficult to put into words, except what might seem to be cliches, or things that you've heard over and over and over again, and yet this is different. Think of God for just this moment in somewhat the nature of the sun in the sky. And then realize the futility of praying to it for warmth or for light. The nature of the sun is warmth and light, and it is forever expressing itself as sunbeam constituted of warmth and light. So let us think of God as life, forever expressing itself in the form of individual life, and then realizing the nature of God life to be eternality, immortality, perfection, infinity, it becomes clear that there is nothing to pray about, or for, or to. From your inner meditations, plus your powers of observation, you have come to the conclusion that the nature of God is infinite intelligence and divine love. Therefore you know that as infinite intelligence you can neither advise it or teach it anything, or acquaint it with anything, and in its nature of love, always loving, you cannot ask it for any form of good. The very nature of infinite intelligence is that which already knows, and the nature of divine love is that which is already pouring forth as care and so forth. Now, in this light, the question arises, how then do we as human beings avail ourselves of intelligent and loving government of an infinite intelligence and a divine love? And the answer is that only as we have either a natural or a developed spiritual awareness or faculty can that government of God be established in our experience. But that raises the question of how do we develop, if we haven't already that spiritual sense, how do we develop it? First of all, the recognition of God as infinite intelligence and divine love sets us free from the foolish habit of turning to God for something, and this in itself begins the development of our spiritual awareness. The ability to live without turning to God for anything is in itself the development of this, or unfolding of this spiritual faculty within us. Now, mark this. At any time that you would turn to God, you must remember that you are not turning to God. You are turning to some concept of God that you have built within yourself. For there is no such thing as a God that can be turned to for anything. So instantly it must become clear to you, when the temptation assails you to turn to God, that you are not turning to God, but to an image which you have built in your own mind of what God is and what God should do. The life of God, the intelligence of God, and the love of God are manifested only in spiritual ways. And your turning to God would have to be for a material form of good, since you have no idea at all of what the spiritual universe is, or of what you would be seeking. I know not how to pray. I know not how to go in, how to come out, or what things to pray for as a human being. Therefore, if I prayed for something or turned to God for something, you can be assured of this, it would be for some improved good on the human plane. So, to develop that spiritual faculty means to learn to renounce prayer in the accepted sense of that term, to overcome the temptation to turn to God, again as we are taught in the Infinite Way Wisdoms, that prayer is a state of is. Read those again. Now, the further development of this spiritual faculty comes to us because of the basic Infinite Way revelation of the nature of error. Since our entire basis is the no power of any form or effect, of no visible form or effect, what would there be to pray for? Certainly not for anything to be overcome or destroyed or removed, since there being but one power, spiritual good alone is. And the recognition that that which appears to us as these forms of material good or evil are not something to ask God's intervention about, but something for us to realize in their true nature. Once the true nature of that which is appearing is observed, our spiritual faculty is then at one with, in attunement with, the spiritual or divine government. We block that government by a recognition of something to be overcome, destroyed, or changed. You will, through this lesson, practice more the idea of meditation in which nothing is being sought, and you will approach the healing work in the realization that you are not there for the purpose of healing. And pretty soon something will unfold in each case which will meet the situation, because you must remember this: there is no one statement of truth or idea of truth which will operate as a healing influence in all of our cases. And so it is often the fact that we must seek individual unfoldment. I will explain this to you. There was a case last week of a fever, and I was asked for help. I have no knowledge of what the illness was. The symptom that was most apparent was the fever. And I meditated and had my inner click, with no specific truth revealing itself to me, and the fever went down to almost normal. But about 4 hours later, the fever was back either where it had been or perhaps even higher. And again I was asked for help, and again I felt the need of meditation. But this time I received a specific truth. Now see this, that I wasn't turning to God for anything. I was merely shutting out material sense and being receptive to any inner unfoldment that might present itself to me as an evidence of omnipresence or the present harmony. And this time the idea came, there is no he, there's only I. And a complete release came. And this time the fever disappeared, but quickly, and did not return. Now, you see the difference of sitting in meditation merely for the unfoldment of omnipresent truth, and not specifically for a healing purpose, but for the instantaneous realization of is, in whatever form it may come. If it were only for the purpose of healing, then we should meditate only when called upon for a healing. But we meditate when called upon or when not called upon, and always for the same purpose, inner revelation of an is, of the is, of that which is. You see the importance of this gaining a true sense of the nature of God, so that there can be God revealing itself within. Now, of course, we come to the second part. In this human picture, really, what is it that we're confronted with as appearance? There is appearance of physical harmony and physical discord. There is the appearance of economic harmony and economic discord. There is the appearance of all kinds of harmony and all kinds of discord. But actually, what is it that is presenting itself to us as these various pictures? And the answer is mind. The second chapter of Genesis, which is a mind creation. Mind appearing as our world. But as long as this mind creation, called the human scene, is accepted as if mind were substance, law, cause, or activity, we will be dealing with this world on a materialistic basis. But the moment that we recognize the nature of the second chapter of Genesis creation as a mind creation devoid of substance, cause, law, we are enabled to deal with it on its basis. Now, this mind creation is material sense, or results in material sense, which forms these pictures of human harmony and human discord. Material sense can give us material health or material disease, material wealth or material poverty, but always it is mind appearing as. Our function is to know that soul, or the word I, is the true creative being, maintaining and sustaining its spiritual creation through the avenue of spirit and discernible through our spiritual awareness. Then, to be able to look at the balance of this scene and see it for what it is, a mind formation devoid of substance, cause, law, reality, and then see where that leads you. This is so important for healing work. that I am repeating this as it came through in over 10 hours yesterday, probably more intensified than this particular unfoldment ever came through before. It must be clear in this that God does not destroy material sense, that God cannot even be brought to any particular situation, but that the realization of God is the destruction of material sense, and that it is not applied to anything as if God were being sifted down to this particular person's ills or this particular nation's lack or this particular incident in some geographical part of the globe. It must be made clear in your own consciousness that God doesn't do anything to you or for those who come to you. That the realization of God itself is the destruction of material sense. Only don't try to channel it here, there, or the other place, or to this condition or situation. Now this brings up an important point that was raised here this week. When I was asked how I work on a particular problem, and my answer is this: every problem that is brought to my conscious awareness brings forth within me some spiritual response. In other words, in the situation of the boy with the fever, the first time that brought forth nothing but a click, and I had to be satisfied with that. But the second time, it brought forth a specific revelation of truth. There is no he, there is only I, and I is God. Now, when it was said to me the boy has a fever or the boy is ill, my thought did not go to the boy or to the fever, but the picture of a boy and a discordant boy was brought to my consciousness, and that brought forth within me the response: there is no he, there is only I. Now in the same way, it makes no difference what problem is brought to me by anyone, or if it is brought to me through a newspaper or radio. The moment the problem touches my consciousness, a response of a spiritual nature is brought forth within me, if not instantaneously, then through meditation. If, for instance, somebody cables me that somebody's dying, instantaneously some kind of a response comes. It may be in the form of nonsense, go about your business, or it may come in the form of dying, life, dying. No, life is God, and that would be the end of it. Or some other response in which a spiritual truth would replace whatever the appearance was that was handed to me. And so it is. If I sit down to work on, let us say, this advertising gadget, I don't think of advertising gadgets, but remember, it was an advertising gadget that sent me down to meditate. And therefore, either instantaneously or by waiting in meditation, a response comes within me and says to me that that is a mind action. It's a creation of the human mind. It's a man-made thing. It's a man-made creature. Therefore, it has no power in God. And who shall fear the creature, since we understand the nature of the Creator? There's my treatment. That's the treatment not that I gave Oh, no, I didn't give that treatment. That's the treatment that came to me, that I was given on the subject of this advertising gadget. God gave me the treatment by saying to me, why, that gadget is man-created. Man-created. It's a creature. Shall you fear a creature more than the spiritual creator? Why, no, this is the second chapter of Genesis creation, and it's without form and void. It's dead. Now, I didn't think that up just then. I took the subject of the advertising gadget, and that's the response that was brought forth within me. Well, now, I understand, of course, that this particular gadget is occupying such an important place in the human thought at the moment that I may have not nullified the entire activity of false advertising. I may have to work on this for 100 years before the thing is entirely destroyed, or false advertising is entirely destroyed in the human mind, or it may come quicker than that. But the idea is that it'll never be met unless the treatment is given to me of God, the Word of God, which is quick and sharp and powerful, and that the error presenting itself to me automatically arouses in me a spiritual response, which is the offset to the claim that is presented. And that is the mode of spiritual treatment as we understand it, whether in the case of our individual healing work or on these major problems which we will gradually undertake, like infections, contagions, epidemics, advertising gadgets, false religions, and so forth and so on. Always, as the problem presents itself to your mind, be on the alert for the treatment which God will give in you, the spiritual answer to the false appearance, and then you will see that you have met the situation in your consciousness, and that will appear outwardly as demonstration of harmony.